What's up, Internet? You're tuning in episode 91 of the FlipScreen Games Podcast, a weekly video game podcast where two best buds from different nations come together to discuss the wide world of video games. I'm your host, Pete and Bessie, joined as always by my partner in crime, Mr. Stephen Radford.
Hello, hello. Welcome
Hello,
back.
Steve. Yeah, it's great to be back.
Yeah, I
I missed you
said the
guys.
same thing last week.
That's the thing, vacations are nice, right? It's always nice to get out of your routine, get a little trip away, but I missed you guys. I missed doing the shows and get like seeing the episode go up where it's like, oh, Tears of the Kingdom reviews are out, all the PlayStation showcase. I'm like,
Oh
man,
yeah, it was a big one. Yeah,
these are
well,
great topics.
we got a good one this week, so you're back just in time, and we can talk about Tears of the
Absolutely.
Kingdom on Nintendo Noise.
Yeah, and we'll probably get into the PlayStation showcase a little bit today too, because like you said, we got a good topic today on the show. We're going to be talking about who's winning 2023 so far between the major platform
Oh,
holders.
between the
So,
major platforms, because I was going to say if it's between me, you, and Max, it's not you, because we established that on last week's episode that you've got a red one on the board, so it's fine. You should go
I
back and
have
listen
a
to
red
that
one on the
episode.
board, so
You
I'm
should go
not
back
winning.
and listen to that episode if you missed
Look,
it.
here's the thing, Steve. Champions don't listen to the peanut gallery, right? Like, obviously, your haters got to be your motivators, right? And if you guys want to put me down, because I am of course, a two-time champion, the namesake of the Mbessi Trophy. Obviously, I don't need to get down in the mud and wrestle with you pigs. All right, you guys, when you got your name on this trophy, that's when we talk. That's when we'll talk. But
Okay,
until
fair
then,
enough. So far, it's looking like it's coming this side of the pond. Max is in the lead so
yeah,
far.
for now
Yeah.
he is. We'll see what happens. And hey, you know what? If I lose, it's been a good run. I'm happy to graciously,
Yeah.
accept. I'd love some competition. That's what I said this year, right? It was like, hey, maybe Max will be good. That would be fun. We'll see.
It's because I let you get away with easy peasy predictions. That's what it was.
See, here's the thing. You want to say easy peasy predictions. I want to say things that are actually within the realm of reality, which is the whole point of the game. You guys say what you want to say. It's not my fault that you and Chewy are like, oh, I think this game that no one's ever heard of, they're gonna remake it. Yeah, it's like, oh yeah, they're gonna put out new hardware in the same year. Yeah, it's like, come on, guys.
I swear to God, if Marathon from Bungie gets announced, I swear, Pete, you've got to eat your words at that point.
I will eat my hat, okay? I'll eat a hat live on this podcast because the idea that game is getting made, you guys are kidding yourself. But anyway, what we are going to talk about here today is PlayStation, Nintendo, Xbox. Who is winning 2023 so far, and who will take it by the end of the year? Because I think, I got to say, prepping for this episode, I was a little surprised. To see how I feel about this and who I think is going to take it.
Yeah, well, I sort of was. I mean, I kind of feel I've played Tears of the Kingdom this last week, so that for me is swayed. It swayed where I think it's gonna go. I kind of feel like that game could have been the only game that Nintendo put out this year, and that would have been fine.
It would have
And
been. They still would have been in the conversation,
yeah,
right?
they still would have been in the conversation. It probably still would be Game of the Year, and we'd all still be thinking like, "Wow, really?
What a year!"
They did it. They didn't have the sophomore slump. They managed to do it." But we'll talk more about Tears of the Kingdom on Nintendo Noise this week.
Yeah, make sure you tune into that one when we're gonna have our full, not review, obviously, because we're all varying amount of way into the game, but we're gonna get knee deep into all of our impressions, and we'll try to keep it spoiler light, but I feel like it's basically impossible to talk about the game without spoiling things.
Hey, don't spoil it for me. I'll be very upset if you spoil it for me.
No plot stuff, but I mean, even just sharing experiences we've had, right? Like, it's so easy to be like, oh, did you see this thing yet? What do you mean?
I didn't even know that was in there. Yeah.
So, but yeah, if you want to go hear that conversation, make sure you tune into Nintendo Noise this week. And then also go join our Discord, where we've got the Tears of the Kingdom channel has been absolutely popping off. Everybody's sharing their thoughts and experiences with the game so far. But let's jump into it. And we'll start with Nintendo, right? Because I think they have, at least to my mind, the clearest list of pros as of now, this part of the year, right? So far, we got two of the highest rated games of the year in Metroid Prime Remaster and Tears of the Kingdom. We have had successful releases of more niche titles, like Advance Wars 1 and 2 finally coming out. Great to see that. Fire Emblem Engage, one of my favorite games of the year so far. We had Kirby's Return to Dreamland Deluxe, also did pretty well. We had, of course, the Super Mario Brothers movie, which is now the first video game adaptation to make over $1 billion at the box office. You know, depending on who you ask, right? Critical success to some, certainly a commercial success, I would say though. So I mean that's a huge W for Nintendo. Not to mention Super Nintendo World having the California launch, right? Uh,
Yeah.
it's
Were you able to get there? Because you were in
I
California,
wasn't,
right?
unfortunately. Yeah, the trip I was there was just a quick 2-dayer, and we were just over on the Disneyland side of things. But next time I'm through there, unless it comes to Orlando first, because I imagine that one will be bigger.
Oh, yeah.
But we'll
Yeah.
see. But I'm definitely trying to get there sooner than later if I can. And then of course, we had just 2 weeks ago now, I think we just did the whole episode about Xenoblade Chronicles 3 Future Redeemed
Yeah.
DLC, which has been a big hit with fans. We've had consistent new Mario Kart 8 tracks. We had Game Boy Color, and Game Boy Advance games all come to NSO. We've had some new releases on the N64 side of things, like
Yeah.
GoldenEye, Pokemon Stadium. I think when it comes to the pros, like Nintendo's firing on all cylinders this year after a couple of years where, I mean, last year I feel like the topic we kept coming back to is like this feels like a slow year. This feels like we're ready for the next thing. And I think this year's proven that the Switch still has a lot of juice left in it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, let alone the Switch, you know. For me, the hottest announcement of this year was Pokemon Sleep. It exists. It's coming.
It
Like
came out.
like what? This is a real thing? I can go to sleep with Pokemon now? Finally. I've been waiting for
After all
it
this
must have been
time.
like 5 years at this point that I've been waiting for Pokemon Sleep. But no, I think this is a really strong year for Nintendo, and I don't think I know we've got Pikmin 4 coming out, Brian. We've got a bunch of other DLC.
Pokemon DLC coming later this year, of
Mhm.
course. We've got, the Metroid Prime 4 looming. Don't think it would come out this year, but the idea that we could maybe see a first proper
Yeah, I was gonna
trailer
say,
is not crazy.
I don't
4 years
think
in,
we've seen everything that they've got to
mm-mm.
show this year so far. I think we've maybe got some smaller titles coming.
We have that
Uh,
rumor of the 2D Mario game, right? Like that we
yeah,
haven't gotten one of those on the Switch at all.
I think Mario's the biggest omission for me. We had such a huge win at the box office with Super Mario Brothers movie, and there was nothing for them to really capitalize on. Granted, you know, everyone went out and bought Mario Kart and it got back into the charts again, but it was a real surprise to me. I thought we would have seen more from them in terms of Mario centric stuff this year. But I guess we had that year of Mario, like Mario 35, a couple of years back, didn't
Sure.
we? So maybe
But still,
they
I
kind of
mean,
wore it out.
it's kind of weird that we've made it this entire console generation without a 2D Mario, right? Like the only
I
2D
think they
Mario games.
consider 3D World as a 2D Mario, and we've got new
Sure,
Super Mario Brothers U Deluxe
but
that
all
they
all
brought
those
that
games were
over.
ports. Like there hasn't been a new
Yeah.
one in a really long time at this point. I think the last proper new 2D Mario was the Super Mario Bros. On Wii U, right? And granted, you can play that on Switch, but
Do you think they're done with that format? Because I feel like 3D World
mm,
was a better 2D Mario for
I
me.
don't think so. I think when you look at the sales, the 2D Mario games sell exceptionally well.
Mhm.
New Super Mario Brothers was one of the best selling games on the DS. Like I think historically, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but what I believe is true is that 2D Mario pretty much exclusively outsells 3D Mario,
That may have
which
been true up until Mario Odyssey, and I
which
think
obviously
probably Mario Odyssey is
big
taken
banger.
over.
But the
And
idea that they would want to get rid of that SKU doesn't make sense to me, frankly. I think
yeah, so
there's a
the
place for the 2D platformer. There just is.
yeah, you're absolutely right. The 3D Mario didn't, you know, Odyssey didn't even overtake Mario Brothers Wii or Super Mario Brothers on the DS.
That's what I'm
Those
saying.
both outsold it. Um, Super Mario Brothers U Deluxe on the Switch was a bit of an outlier though. 15 million sales in comparison to Mario Odyssey's 25 million, but even still a support and it sold
Support of a game that
absolute
already
crazy
sold,
amount.
several, million
Yeah.
copies on Wii when it released on Wii U. That was one of the
I
games that had the highest attach rate on that console.
I was really surprised Mario Maker 2 didn't have more life in it, you know?
I
Only
was too.
less than 8 million copies sold. I kind of thought that they could have capitalized on that a little bit more.
The first one felt like such a moment, and, like, I remember there being such a culture of, like, watching people play it on YouTube and on Twitch and everything, and, yeah, it just felt like it didn't capture
Like,
people the
came and
same way
went,
this time
yeah.
around, yeah.
I think
Which
it was
I
too adjacent to New Super Mario Brothers U Deluxe, and people are just like, "Well, I just wanna play Mario, I don't necessarily wanna
yeah.
make the game, I'm not very good at making the games." I thought I wanted to make the games, I'm terrible at making games, so I didn't.
Yeah, there's a reason we're on this side of the mic, I think.
Yeah, but do you think Pokemon DLC, Pikmin 4, Metroid Prime 4, well, if we even see that, do you think Pokemon DLC and Pikmin 4, which is what we've got announced, are all we've got left for the year from Nintendo? Because obviously they're not showing up at any of the well, they weren't going to show up at E3, and obviously that then got cancelled. They're not showing up at Summer Game Fest, from what we
They are gonna
know.
be at Gamescom, though.
They are at Gamescom later in the year, and that's after Pikmin 4 is released. So maybe they've got something to show there. But is that for next year? Are they then looking forward to 2024? Maybe it's the last few games on the system because we spoke about on Nintendo Noise last week that it seems like there's going to be a new console sometime in 2024. At the earliest, it's going to be in the next fiscal year. So maybe they're looking again the final few games out for the current gen Switch.
I think that makes sense, right? Like, the idea to me that I don't know, maybe there's one more game that we don't know about this year. It doesn't seem crazy because, like, what's the holiday game? They usually have a holiday game. Maybe that's the 2D Mario, right? Something you get a new bundle. There's also the Camelot Software Planning is the team that makes the Mario sports titles for the last several years. And they basically put out a game every 2 to 3 years, like since they started working with Nintendo. So the idea that maybe there's another Mario, like sports all stars type game or something like that later this year where you get a Mario game and it's hitting a different kind of skew. That could be the case. I wouldn't be surprised if there was another game like kind of that ilk. But I think when you compare, right, like Metroid Prime, Tears of the Kingdom, Advance Wars, Fire Emblem, Kirby's Return to Dreamland, Xenoblades DLC, Pikmin 4, and Pokemon's DLC, that's 8 major releases this year. That's a lot more than the last couple years, you know?
Well, and
So
as we'll see, it's a lot more than I don't think it's a lot more than last year. Last year they had a pretty big year. So they had Arceus, Splatoon 3, Kirby and the Forgotten Lands, Mario Rabbids, Bayonetta 3, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, Nintendo Switch Sports, Xenoblade Chronicles 3, Fire Emblem Warriors, Mario Strikers, Harvestella Triangle Strategy. Was that them? I think they did Triangle Strategy, right?
I can't remember quite, but I mean, you're talking 10 to 12,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, so you're right. So we'd be under this year if there wasn't more. Oh, you know what though? We do have one other game this year I forgot to put on this list, which is the Bayonetta
Oh
Cereza and
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah,
Lost.
the little chibi one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which that did pretty well too, right? That was I mean, we don't know the financials of it yet, but it was critically well received. So
Mhm.
so they'd be at 9 for this year if they didn't put out another thing. So
Yeah, which is insane when you
that's
compare
pretty
that to the
good.
other 2 platforms. I know it's different, right? Because we're deep in the generation of the Nintendo
Right.
Switch. We're not deep in the generation of the Xbox and PS5, especially when you take COVID into consideration that would have pushed things back. You look at the output, right, from say Xbox this year. We're at 3 games so far to
I
like
mean, it's even
Nintendo's
worse on the
6,
PlayStation
right?
side, right? It's 2 this year. And one of them is not they didn't develop it, they just published it, right? But like if you take out games that Sony didn't have an internal studio make, I think it's just Spider-Man this year. That's it, right? Like
We had the Horizon game, if you count
You're
the
right. You're
VR
right.
titles.
The Burning Shores DLC as
Yeah,
well. That's 2 big releases. But even so, right? I mean, that's a quarter of what we're talking about here on Nintendo side of the fence, right? And that's this year so far, right? Like I don't know. That's
yeah.
it's pretty big. And like you said, I think it is very significant that that Nintendo has created this situation where they're about halfway through the life cycle off, right? Like the Switch is now quieting down as Xbox and PlayStation's consoles are ideally, right, like starting to warm up, and this
Yeah.
is where you're going to get more and more releases. And I mean, that might not even happen for another year or two yet, right? Like we got a couple big releases coming out in the short term, but you think about the PlayStation 4, there was a huge portion of its life cycle where the narrative was why doesn't Sony have a big holiday game anymore? Where's that? And they were relying on third parties, and it was the last couple years of the PS4 where it was every year you had a big game or two, right? Like starting with Horizon, right, in 2017, which is what 4 years into the life cycle, yeah, because it
Yeah,
came out in
4 years.
2013. And it was like Horizon. The next year you had God of War and Spider Man. The next year you had um, that would have been Days Gone, 2019, I think. Is
Yeah.
that right?
Yeah, and then it was The Last of Us Part 2.
And Ghost
Yeah.
were both that year. So like, I you'll get there, but Nintendo's there now, right? And like we're getting a big sequel to the game that kicked off that console generation. Like I've been thinking about that a lot while playing Tears of the Kingdom. Is like how different my life was when I was playing Breath of the Wild
Me
versus now.
too. I was like, I was talking to a friend the other night, and I was like playing it, and it was pretty late, and I was like, man, I just want to stay up till 3, 4 in the morning, like I was doing with Breath of the Wild. I am no longer like 25 or however old I was back then,
Yeah.
and I can tell, like, I'm tired at, like, midnight, 1 o'clock, I just wanna go to bed now, but I still really wanna be staying up and playing this game. I just can't do it anymore. Like, I've definitely changed as a person and since, Breath of the Wild came out, and you
Yeah,
can really
man.
feel that.
Yeah, and I mean, it's like when I was first playing that game, like we didn't know each other, right? Like
Yeah.
I was we were both in different long-term relationships. I'm married now, like it's it's crazy. Like so much has changed. And I think that speaks to the fact that, right, like the Switch life cycle has got to be coming to a close. So, this is kind of we're getting to the swan song now, and I
Well,
think
do you think
you
that's
see that.
true? Because they constantly keep saying on all these investor calls, and we saw it on the last one, there's no plans. Switch is still, we feel, around halfway in its generation or in its life cycle, whatever that means. I could see that easily just being the branding is the Switch is
That's just how
this.
they talk. Yeah,
Yeah.
it reminds me of, and I've brought this up before, right? When they revealed the DS, I remember they commented about how, oh no, this isn't replacing the Game Boy Advance. The Game Boy Advance still has games coming out. It's part of the family of consoles, right? This is what we
And we
do.
had a similar conversation with the Switch. I remember we were like a year into the Switch's life cycle, and it's like, oh, really? Luigi's
Still
Mansion
putting out
2?
3DS games.
Luigi's Mansion 2 is not a Switch game. It's a 3DS game. Why? This makes no sense. So what are you doing? And
Hey
I guess it
Pikmin,
was
right? Like there's all those games
yeah.
where it's like, why is this coming out? Like why put it on Switch? I don't want to play it on the 3DS anymore. You know?
Do you think a lack of hardware is really going to be a negative for them? Because obviously the other two aren't going to. Well, maybe the other two will have new hardware. There's the rumor that PS5 is getting a Pro model. Um, I don't think we're getting any new hardware this year. I don't think they would have lied to investors. I think we would have seen figures reflected in their estimations for the profit in the next quarter
I don't think we're
if we
getting
were
it
going to
this
see another
year.
hardware. Yeah.
But I think it's got to be soon, and like I don't know, maybe we're wrong because it has continued to sell and like maybe they just don't feel that pressure. Um cuz
Well, and
again,
I'm
right?
playing Tears of the Kingdom, and I'm just like, "Oh, this feels fine."
I
I d
know, exactly. And it's probably going to be game of the year. They're going to get a game of the year on this hardware that's so old and blah blah blah, so it's like whatever, right? Like how much does it really matter,
I think
right?
it's testament, though, to how polished you can make a game in 6 years
Uh-huh.
versus rushing out, say, Pokemon Sword and Shield or whatever the last one was. Was it
Scarlet and
Scarlet and
Violet.
Violet? Scarlet and Violet, and that looking like a hot mess.
Optimization goes a long way. Absolutely. I, look no further than this or like The Last of Us on PS3. How good that looks compared to
Mhm.
launch games on the PS3, right? Like it's
Why, you look at The Last of Us Part 2 versus some
game's
of the launch
incredible.
games
Ghost of
today, yeah.
Tsushima looks incredible
Yeah.
too, right? Like it's like yeah, you take your time and you know the hardware, you get a better result. It's just the truth. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think yes. I think you're probably the rumors you're talking about like next year feels like it could be right. But also, I know you and I have talked ourselves into that for years. We're like, surely we'll hear about it next year. Surely next year is the year. At some point, that has to be
I
true.
know, but this time it really feels like it, right? Because
Where
I
else
mean,
do you go from
maybe I'm yeah, I don't know. I really don't. I mean, I don't think we're gonna be talking about the sequel to Tears of the Kingdom being on the current Switch and it being like in 15 years' time you'll be able to play like from the initial conception of like the Switch, we're like talking like what, 10, 12 years down the line for the second sequel. There's no way. There's no way you're playing the next sequel to Tears of the Kingdom, the next one in the Zelda main
I
franchise
don't think we'll
on
get a sequel
the
to Tears
current
of the Kingdom
Switch.
for what it's worth, but I think it'll be a new Zelda probably, right?
Yeah, probably yeah, but in the same way that it was a sequel to Breath of the Wild is in development, I do think this is what we're gonna get for the foreseeable future. It's like these environmental puzzles with these
Yeah, for sure.
skills in this open world setting, and
I'm
we'll just
imagining like a new direction though, right? Like it's a new timeline, a new,
yeah,
it's a clean
yeah.
slate and it'll be intimately connected to the next piece of hardware, I would think.
I would hope so. I mean, I don't think Breath of the Wild was intimately connected to the Switch. It was a Wii U game that got ported over. There's nothing really special there, and even Tears of the Kingdom, I don't feel like you had to play it on this. You know, I've emulated it on another device, and it runs fine. Like, you don't need a Switch, and there's nothing special about that configuration, really. Um, that really is, "Oh, this can only be played on the Switch." It's not like, "Oh, we play 1 Joy-Con each, and you can only" you
Right.
got these special, like, ice cubes in the Joy-Con, this can only really be done with HD Rumble.
Yeah, I mean, good point. Good point. But yeah, I am of the opinion we are nearing the end of the life cycle. I think we can't have more than 2 years left in this thing. I
Oh
really
god, I
just don't
hope
see
it's
it.
not 2 years. I really
Could
hope
be
it's not.
because we're what? I mean, we're 6 years right now?
Yeah,
Yeah. So, I mean, 2 more is 8. That's not
that's it,
unheard
that
of.
feels too long. I feel like I need to be hearing about a new Switch in
We're headed
January.
into a recession though, and it's like you think about what was the longest console generation prior was the 360 PS3 Wii generation, and that went as long as it did because of the recession and because gamers
Yeah,
didn't have money for new hardware.
I get
Um,
that. At some point, though, Nvidia's gonna be like, "We ain't making that chip anymore. You're the only people
I
we're
mean,
making that shitty
that's
Nvidia
the thing though,
Tegra
is
chip for these days."
the sales haven't slowed down though, right? So it's like, what do they care?
Yeah, true.
You
Very
know?
yeah, good point.
Because that's the thing is I think we're getting to the point where we need new hardware, but I also think that the general public does not feel that way, and they don't think of it that way. I think
No, but I also think the narrative shifted I think around the GameCube era, more going into the Wii era, that Nintendo wasn't this like cutting edge hardware anymore like they
yeah,
used to be. You know, we had the FX chips in the SNES, we had the Ultra 64, and it was the first one to do 3D graphics, and it invented the like joystick and brought that to consoles as a way to kind of move around in 3D space. The narrative shifted from them being at the cutting edge, and I would really like to see them get back to that, and I think with NVIDIA's help, they can do with, like, DLSS and, like, let's get some of the tech in there that people are talking about. I think the Switch kind of brought them back into that. It was like, "Holy
yeah,
shit, I can play these big games on, like, this small device again, and it's in my hands. This feels like next gen. This feels next level," and I
definitely.
feel
Yeah,
like
I
we've
think
become acclimatized to that now, and I think we need to move on to the next thing before it becomes stale, and they end up with a Wii U situation where it's just like, "Oh, I can't play most of the games I want on that. I'm not gonna bother buying one."
yeah, and I think they do want to I think stay ahead of the curve, right? You don't want to wait until you don't want to be in a Wii situation where by the time you launch the successor, the current console's plateaued. You know,
Mhm.
the Wii had really slowed down its sales by the time we actually got a Wii U, and I think you're better off striking while the iron's hot, cutting the price of the base Switch, and letting the folks that don't care about cutting edge get in at a lower price. Keep putting stuff out on it for a couple of years, like you did with 3DS, as you let the you and me's of the world you know, uh, test out what
I
comes
think it's
next.
gonna be more than the you and me's of the world. I think everyone's gonna want one of those things.
I think you're probably right with a big portion of the audience, just
Like, you know,
considering how
you show a new 3D Mario running on that, they'll be like,
yeah.
"Wow, yeah, I want that."
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. So yeah, I mean, to talk about what's coming up, right? Like we kind of already covered it. I think we know that there are at least two big hitters coming between Pokemon DLC and Pikmin 4. And I think if they have even one or two other things in their back pocket, I mean, like you said it at the top, the only thing they could have put out this year would have been Tears of the Kingdom, and we would have called it a good year.
Yeah.
And I think they already have at least three other games on this list that are, not of Zelda quality, but that are absolute like big wins, right? Like critically, commercially successful games that we'll look back on as some of the best games of the year. Fire Emblem Engage will be on my top 10, right? Like,
We're probably gonna get the, Splatoon 3 DLC at some point as well. Do you remember that, like, black and white one where
yeah,
you, like, painted it in with colors it looked like? So I could see that, and that maybe revives Splatoon 3 and interest in that game, which kinda
maybe
seemed to stagnate a little. That game did way better than I expected, though, if you look at the investor relations, like, almost at Splatoon 3 levels of sales already.
that's good.
Um,
The
yeah,
audience
it's
that's there is there for it, I guess, right?
yeah.
Like doesn't feel like the conversation kept up with it, but if there are people there playing, then that's all that matters.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. I think the conversation though for them is Tears of the Kingdom was a slam dunk, and I genuinely think that's all that matters. I think they're probably going to sweep up at the Game Awards regardless.
I think right now this year is theirs to lose, is
Yeah,
how I'm feeling about it.
yeah. In the same way that Elden Ring was theirs to lose last year, I really do feel like the same rings true for Tears of the Kingdom.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got two more console platform holders to talk about in just a second here. But before we get into that, let me remind you that this episode of the FlipScreen Games podcast is brought to you by our Patreon producers for the month of May. They are, of course, Arnold J. Rimmer, Christopher Valenz, Earth Visitor, Gabriel Hasselmeyer, aka Sobi, Snackago, Ty the Dude, and Wakahula. Thank you all so much for your support over on patreon.com/FlipScreenGames. You're all the realest of the real, and we greatly appreciate your support of this and all of our sister shows. Speaking of which, don't forget to go tune into this week's episode of Nintendo Noise, where we're going to keep the conversation about Tears of the Kingdom rolling. We're going to get into all the nitty gritty. Go check it out. If you're playing the game, if you're looking for folks to gab about with it, head over to our Discord, where we've got a Tears of the Kingdom channel set up where everybody's posting all about the game, but with spoiler tags. So you can go in there and it's no problem. But, if you want to see everybody's updates, feel free. There's a lot of good stuff over there. However you choose to get involved, we thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of FlipScreen Games podcast. You can head over to flipscreen.games to find a bunch more ways that you can show your support or get involved in the community. However you choose to do it. Thanks for coming and hanging out with us. So let's get into the Xbox side of things, because I think
Yeah.
Xbox, if Nintendo is the oh, they're having a great year. Everybody's loving Nintendo. I think Xbox is the other side of that right now, right? They've taken a couple big L's, couple big hits right on the chin. It's been a mixed bag for them this year. I think a lot more than
I
honestly
think
more
it
negative
started
than
out with
positive.
some wins though, like Hi-Fi Rush was a big old win for them.
Slam dunk.
Yeah.
And that I remember being like, hey, off to a great start, right? Like that was
Well, we got
early in the
that.
year, setting a
Yeah.
good cadence. You had two more big exclusives on the horizon.
And Redfall looked really exciting. Look, it was gonna be a great
It did.
title. We had a release date for Forza Motorsport. It was coming this year. I think people thought it was a lot further out than it seems to be. I think that one's probably gonna get delayed, after the reaction that we had with, Redfall.
I mean, unless
But
unless it's done, right? Unless it's
yeah.
actually ready.
There's been a lot of it feels like damage control that's had to be done in Microsoft's court, not only around flop releases like Redfall and the absolute disastrous launch that was, but also around this whole Activision Blizzard thing, which is really at this point a 50-50 as to whether it seemingly goes through. I think it's now, I would have said a month ago when the CMA made their decision. Probably not going to happen today. The EU approved the acquisition and managed to get some really big contingencies out of Microsoft
Yeah.
in that they've got to allow any streaming platform that wants or grant them a free license to be able to stream any Activision Blizzard game for the next 10 years. the CMA is still not happy about that. They think it needs to be kind of in perpetuity and that it requires too much regulatory oversight. But we'll see where that goes.
I think at this point, I mean, granted, I predicted it earlier this year when the CMA stuff happened a couple weeks ago. We like talked about it. I told you I thought it was still going to go through. Um,
I don't know that it can go through this year. We've got the FTC's hearing, isn't it, until
Not
August?
until August, right?
So like that's
And,
way down the
and
year.
we'll see. Maybe it does push into next year. When I made that prediction, I believe that was one of my was that my risky
It
pick?
is one of your predictions that they acquire them this year. Yeah.
This no, I know that, but I was it my risky pick? Do you remember? You guys did it
No,
last
your
week.
risky pick is something to do with E3 and
Oh, the view. Oh yeah, I got
the
that
viewing
one down.
figures. Yeah,
I took points on that one. Um,
that's not what
but yeah,
Max thinks, but yeah.
oh, he's dead wrong, and he is a sore fucking loser if he thinks I'm not getting those points. Um, however, I remember saying at that time, very, very totally reasonable chance that it will go into next year. I still think it'll end up getting, pushed through. And you brought up an interesting wrinkle offline before we started recording, where was it Tom Warren from The Verge?
No, it was Andy Robinson over
Andy
at, I think it's
Robinson from
yeah,
Video Games
Playtonic.
Chronicle.
Oh yeah, Video Game Chronicle. Yeah, that's it.
And he had pointed out that if if the UK is kind of the one holdout that Microsoft could spin off Activision Blizzard UK and just operate differently in that region than the rest of the world if everybody else signs off on it. So if even if they're not able to satisfy the CMA's concerns, I don't know how much that matters at this point. The EU is a big win, and I think that if the
Mhm.
EU gave it the okay, the idea that the FTC won't is pretty unrealistic. I think.
It depends what the FTC's issue is, right? If it's the cloud thing, then I think it's fine. The FTC's block seemed to be surrounding Call of Duty. And that initial issue of it potentially withholding content from gaming rivals is what the FTC's the director of FTC's Bureau of Competition said, and that they today seek to stop Microsoft from gaining control over leading independent game studio and using it to harm competition in multiple dynamic and fast growing markets. So it depends if their view is just cloud, which seemingly is what the EU and the CMA is really have issue with at this point, then I think fine. But if it's with, say, Call of Duty on Xbox and it potentially not being on PlayStation, are the contingencies that Microsoft willing to make? Are they going to assuage concerns because at the moment they're being sued by the FTC
I
for
feel like
breaching antitrust law?
I feel like the fact that they've agreed to a free license to anybody who wants it is kind of like, I don't, and again, I've said personally, I don't want this to happen. I think the likelihood of it getting stopped seems insane because just a few years ago, we watched Disney buy one of the only competitors that they had in the filmmaking uh, space at all and bought so much content that used to be, you know, like something like The Simpsons, right? Like that is an insane value proposition for your streaming platform, and they were able to do that, you know? Um, so like fair enough, right? Could obviously still get tripped up in a lot of places, but I just don't see it. I don't think that this is as pushing towards monopoly as that was, and that went through without a problem, you know?
Yeah, I think it's different administrations there. It's whether the Biden administration wants to kind of make an example of this and be like, no, big tech is
Yeah.
not going to be able to keep buying up everything, and they've got to
but it
innovate themselves.
But it's like, I just don't see that, you know? It's like, I like his I don't know. We're not trying to get into politics, not a politics podcast, but I haven't seen that type of effort from his administration in other places to be like, we're going to show how different we are. So, like, I don't know. Like, maybe so. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that is a short sighted thing to look against because it is a different time. And maybe the fact that deal went through has changed people's attitudes, right? Because of how strong it made Disney's position. Who's to say?
Hmm.
But I think, however you slice it, that story is a big con for them this year because it's taken all of the oxygen around Xbox. That's been so much of the conversation. they're investing a ton of time and money for this thing that we're not confident is going to go through.
And
That's
I feel
if
like
this
it's taken up
fails, it is
so
such a
much of
public embarrassment for Phil
Mhm.
Spencer.
I think it's taken up so much of his time as well that he's just been completely hands off with some of the studios. Like he's just, yeah, he I think it was on the Kind of Funny Games podcast where he
It
said he
was the
was,
Kind of Funny Xcast, their
yeah,
Xbox
he was
show
pretty
he
much
came on.
hands off when it came to Redfall, and I just like your company's name is on the back of that box. They're
Well, they talked
publishing
about
it.
it.
It's
The
going on your platform. You should really be pushing back a little bit more on that game
That was such an
specifically.
interesting conversation. I would recommend people go listen to it if you haven't. Phil's pretty candid in it, and he talks a bit about how it's been a challenge for them to like realize their role for games that are already in development, that have already been active development for years, and being able to come in and offer those resources at an earlier point, or coming in and creating like having that assessment or whatever. But it's again right. That's been the whole story of the last several years of Xbox. They're gonna get it together. They're gonna figure it out. Like they're
Hmm.
next year is gonna be the year, and the dominoes are gonna fall, and it's just like this year just feels like another let's wait and see, let's hope, and again, right? Like after Redfall, who isn't worried about Starfield?
Yeah,
Like
I mean, and even Phil's comments on that in that interview that where he said it was there's no world in which Starfield is an 11 out of 10 game and people start selling their PlayStations. It's just like even a comment like that, it's just like Phil, that's like completely missing the point. People aren't going to be selling their PlayStations to buy Xboxes, but we're concerned at the level of quality of the software coming out of Microsoft Studios. It's not just Redfall. I feel like we've had either very little output from Microsoft Studios over the last year or so, or they've been messy. You know,
I
the Halo Infinite launch was not great. The Redfall launch was not great. We've had smaller titles like Pentiment uh, and
I think
Hi-Fi
that's
Rush that have done well, but the AAA stuff has been, apart from say Forza Horizon, kind of been lacking.
see that's the thing though. I don't know. I struggle with that narrative because in the example you just gave, that's actually only one failure, right? Like the multiplayer of Halo Infinite did not stick around. I think in hindsight, we look at that as a failure. The game launched to critical success, and it was on it
I
was
mean,
on our
that game was meant to launch with the Series X. It's on my box of the Series
yeah.
X. It was delayed 2 years. Then it launched without the multiplayer. It's never had the multiplayer co-op. They gutted the studio
It launched
because they were
without
unhappy.
the story multiplayer to clarify
Yeah,
it. Yeah.
and that's now been cancelled. It's never
Right.
coming.
Right. And that's the thing is I'm not going to sit here and say that that was like a win, but I don't think it's a failure on the level of Redfall. Whereas Redfall I think is a abject failure. I don't think anything else they've put out has been a failure. I think Halo mixed bag, like it was a mistake in many ways for sure. I think all the other games you talked about are good though, right? Like Forza was a win.
Mhm.
Psychonauts 2 was really good, right? Like a lot of those smaller games came out and came together very well, so it's
Mhm.
like it is those big marquee titles though that like you've had your confidence shaken, right? Because it's like this was supposed to be a new era. This was supposed to be a new Xbox. And like we're getting so much stink of the old Xbox. And you want to hope that Starfield comes out and they know that it's got to be a hit and it hits. It's been delayed a ton already and like it's had a lot of time to cook, but I think the pressure is so high on it. It needs to be a generation defining game. It needs to be the best game on the platform. And I think it can be, but like those are big shoes to fill. It's very much what we
Especially
talked
this
about with
year.
Tears of the Kingdom, right? Like it was just it had that. Oh, is it going to be a sophomore slump? Is it going to live up to the hype? Okay, it did. So that means that this game has even more pressure on it now because now it has to come out and be all those things and be the next Skyrim, be the next real big amazing Western RPG, and it also has to be compared to Tears of the Kingdom.
Yeah.
That's rough. That is a uphill battle.
Yeah, I mean, but they knew that. I mean, they knew it was going to happen. They knew Tears of the Kingdom was coming this year. They missed multiple release windows for this game. if I'm remembering correctly,
Yeah,
right?
they called their shot at the 18 months thing. They gave a release date and then they pushed it, you know?
Yeah, and that was and then it was meant to come first quarter of this year. They've pushed that. That may have been a reaction to Zelda, who wants to release around that game.
And
Probably
again,
no one.
you hope that that it's been enough. You hope that that's been enough time and hey, the bugs are steamed out and it's where we want it now, right? Like you hope it's been enough time, but it's like I wonder, right? One of the comments that Phil made in the kind of funny interview that you're referencing is how Redfall, you know, I think even if it didn't have technical problems and it had 60 FPS, it wouldn't have reviewed very
It's
well.
a design
It just
issue.
wasn't a good
Yeah,
game.
it's just not a good game.
And there's a lot of questions about that, right? Why did that happen? Was that Bethesda was trying to force Arcane
Yeah,
to make that
but it's
kind of game?
strange.
Like,
Like it kind of feels like
you don't know.
if I was buying a big publisher with multiple game studios, I would want to see what they're working on, assess whether it's worth continuing down that avenue, and maybe cancel some projects.
Yeah.
And be
And
like,
and again,
this ain't working. Let's make another Dishonored. Let's
I
reboot that
bet you that
franchise."
that's the lesson that's been learned now, but is it too late, right? Like has confidence in Xbox in Phil been shaken in a way that now they have to make that ground up in a way that's difficult, you know? And I don't think that we're at that point of no return yet, but like you can only take so many more L's before leadership at Microsoft is like, "What's up, Phil?" or like the narrative
Yeah.
turns, you know?
Does it shake your confidence in if the ABK deal does go through, that Microsoft won't come in and just with, like, all guns blazing and, like, mix things up like we thought they would, maybe revive some old franchises like we were hoping, and maybe they're just buying it for Call of Duty, and they're just gonna continue the norm and be hands off, right? In the same way that they've been with Bethesda. So, will you carry on and build what you want? And Blizzard continues doing their own thing,
I don't
and
think so.
every other studio's Call of Duty.
I think again to take it back to Phil's comments in that interview, he and again, I'll say this, right? Phil is a CEO, right? He's a corporate leader and he's going to say what he thinks he needs to say, right? So, if you go and listen to that interview and you think he's disingenuous or this or that, you want to take his comments with a grain of salt, fair enough. I respect that. My interpretation of Phil as a person is that what he says publicly, he means. And I don't think that that means he doesn't play PR speak or any of that stuff. He does. It's part of his job. But I think when he goes and he has an interview, I get the sense that he's being candid and he's saying what he means. So take that for what it is. In that interview, I think he very much took a lot of the responsibility for the failures of what happened with Redfall and what's happened with Microsoft's releases up to date. And I think the idea that this L is is going to be a lesson learned is something that I believe. I think that they will handle things differently with new projects if they are to acquire ABK, and beyond, right? However, whatever new acquisitions come up, I imagine that's going to be part of the conversation now is, hey, as soon as you're acquired, let's touch base. Let's see where you're at. What resources can we offer? Where are you at? Like, how is the game previewing? All those things. How do we ensure quality, not just quantity? And I think he knows that that's the problem he needs to solve now because it's become the narrative. And the narrative isn't anymore, oh, good guy Phil. Oh, good guy Xbox. Oh, Game Pass, this, that, right? Like, it is now, what's up with Xbox? What's going on over there? And I think that they know that they need to right the ship. Can they right the ship is a different question. And I think Starfield is a big linchpin in that. If Starfield comes out and sucks, then Phil might lose his job, right? If the ABK deal does
Do you
not go
think that
through,
happens?
I think it could. The
Yeah.
dude, because when
I
you think
think
about it, if
I
you're,
kind of feel like Phil wants to leave anyway after the ABK deal. I kind of feel like let's get that across the line, and then they announce a succession plan and he
I don't
kind
think
of
so.
steps down. I could see him moving into a more higher position within Microsoft. I could easily see him like going
Mm,
up the chain if the ABK deal goes through.
I don't think so. I don't see that for him. I don't think that's what he wants. I think he wants to work in games. And I don't think he'd be interested in just being like a higher corporate leader. I don't really think that's what his
You
passion
what, you
is.
don't think he would like to run all of Microsoft at some point?
No, I don't. I really don't. I don't. And like, I could be wrong. I don't think that's his aspiration. I think in the same way that like, I don't think Satoru Iwata, right, was somebody who um, had desire to be a CEO as much as was a he worked at
Mhm.
Nintendo and they needed him to step into that role. And I'm not equating the two of them, right? Obviously, Phil is a corporate guy. He's not a developer. But he really does love video games, right? Like he cares about games genuinely. He's a fan of games. I think he wants to be in games, and I think his goal is for his legacy to be creating an Xbox that is, stable and sticks around and has the
And isn't
amount of
gutted by the next CEO and span off into
exactly.
something else, yeah.
Yeah, and that it has the same amount of resonance with gamers that Nintendo and PlayStation do. I genuinely think that's what he wants to
Yeah.
achieve.
I
Um,
think you're right too. But I think for me, the more interesting question is if the Activision Blizzard deal doesn't go through, what the hell happens at Activision? Because they're stuck with Bobby Kotick at the
That's a
helm.
whole other thing. Because that's the thing. He's even said if the ABK deal doesn't go through, like it doesn't change Xbox's strategy. They look at this as an accelerant for their strategy,
Yeah.
not the defining thing, right? His goal isn't to buy up all these companies to just become the biggest. It's like, well, if we own all this stuff, we can make these deals and we can advance Game Pass. And like he's playing a 4D chess game and he's made some bad moves recently, right? And I, you know, I I think he's a smart dude. He's made plays that I thought were dumb that have played out. I didn't know that Game Pass was a good idea when they launched it, right? That bet paid off. So, I'm not going to count him out yet, but like I think the rest of this year is like that's all they have is trying to prove that they're on top of it and that
Mhm.
Starfield needs to come out and be a legit game of the year competitor. Like, we need to be able to think, I don't know, was it better than Tears of the King? Like, that's gotta be the
That
conversation.
I do not think that's gonna happen in any scenario. I can't say, but maybe I'm wrong. I think it's gonna be, "Oh, it's another Bethesda game." And for me, that's great because I love Bethesda games, and it's this whole big world, and it's a whole new place to
Yeah, but I
explore.
mean,
But I don't know that it's doing anything on the level of Tears of the
I don't
Kingdom
know.
from what I've
It's
seen. But we'll
it's
find
hard
out
to
at the
say, right?
Starfield Direct.
Because it's like this team between Fallout 3 and Skyrim have made a game this revolutionary before. And I'm not even saying that those are the 2 best, whatever, right? Like, your mileage may vary on which ones you like the best, but
Yeah,
Fallout
Oblivion.
3 and Skyrim are genre defining games. They are generation defining games. And this team is
On
capable
multiple
of doing it.
generations in Skyrim's
Sure,
case.
sure. And they're capable of that, right? But it's like it's their first new IP in like decades, and it's his first like game he's been the lead on since Fallout 4, like which obviously, you know, didn't live up to expectations in that way. So I don't know. Like
I kinda liked Fallout 4. I thought
a
it was
lot
a
of
good game.
people I mean, like, I think most people agree that it's good, but I don't think it came out and had the reaction you're talking about, where it's like, "Oh, yeah, it's more Fallout 3, but it's next gen, it's better."
Yeah, which was what I was looking for. It's
But that's
fine.
the thing is that this can't be that. This needs to be Skyrim. This needs to be Fallout 3. This needs to be, "Holy shit, they upped the ante." And they can do that, I think, but it's also I don't know. It's like so much of that is ineffable because like even if on a gameplay system all that stuff it works, how's the story, right? Like is the story like really compelling? Are there characters that you love? Are
Did you
there
really care about
choices
the
that
story in Skyrim and Fallout? Like, yeah, the choices thing's cool, but I don't know that the stories were really all that compelling. It's the components and the bits in between and the systems. It feels like a
yeah,
systems
no,
game.
I mean I don't agree because like I don't think it's that it's like the story quote unquote of Skyrim. It's the stories that you tell while playing it. It's the
Yeah, I think
water
it's more the
cooler.
world. It's the
Yeah.
world I'm living in, and that's really the thing that draws people
But
in.
that's the thing is that has to hit. Like that has to be well realized. And I think a big part of why Fallout 4 didn't connect is because people didn't like the story as much. And like, it didn't have the juice of New Vegas, and it didn't have the novelty of Fallout 3, so what is it? It's just a
Mm.
prettier version of a game we got before? Okay. How important is that? Is that what we want? No, it's not. Like, it needs to be something that, you're like, "Wow, like, I can't believe how much my choices matter," or having those moments like we talked about with Tears of the Kingdom where you're like, "Oh, did you go here? Did you see this? What choice did you make? Oh, you helped that
Well,
person?
yeah,
I
and they're
killed them
talking
right
about
away
how
with
many
this whole
worlds
thing."
there are.
So, I don't know, but, I think in the way that we said, right, Nintendo, this is their year to throw away. This is Xbox year to stop the bleeding.
Do you know
And
what? I think they can really turn the narrative around in June. I think that the Xbox showcase last year, I think was the best show we got last year. When Kojima showed up
yeah,
on
but that's
stage and we
that's like
saw
a black eye for
Starfield for
them
the
now
first
though,
time.
right? Because they were like, all these games are coming out in 18 months, and how many of them actually came out? A lot of them missed those dates. And I think as cool of a presentation as it was, they did not deliver. And I think this year, that is now the taste in everybody's mouth is, can Xbox win hearts and minds with hype? I don't think they can. They need to prove that they can deliver. And the only opportunity they have to do that this year left is Starfield.
Mhm.
Because again, even if they have a fire presentation, right? And they're like, hey, we've got Perfect Dark and Fable and Outer Worlds 2 and Gear 6 and Hellblade 2 and Avowed and State of Decay 3 and Indiana Jones and Everwild. And they show us updates on all those games. Great. But how many of them are coming out soon? And are they going to be good? Or are they going to be Redfall? Redfall looked good too.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think Hellblade 2 is very close. I think that's probably next year. I think Forza Motorsport goes into next year. I could see a Fable update. The Forza Horizon 5 is out. We've seen all the DLC now. That they've probably shifted all of those people over to the Fable, or at least a bunch of them over to Fable. They've got a lot going on in the background, and I think that's what's always seemingly the case with Xbox is, oh, we've seen a lot, but we don't really know. Whereas I feel like PlayStation and Nintendo, at least in the last few years, have kind of held things a little bit close to their chest until it kind of reaches closer to that launch window.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel like that's the right strategy because it gets people excited nearer the time, and those games are imminent. There are the exceptions, right? We saw that the sequel to Breath of the Wild is in development, and that hyped everyone up. We saw the Wolverine logo, and, like, little ident that they had,
Yeah. Oh,
that got everyone excited, but we know that that was further out because they were already working on Spider-Man 2, and we knew that
right.
that was coming. So it was kind of just a bit of a tease.
We need more of that though. I think this whole generation we've moved so far away from that since the pandemic, like because there's been less of these events. And it's like, I don't like that. And I know that that's like it's very like it's broken up, right? We've had arguments with colleagues about this, right? I've gone back and forth with AJ from Redirect about this, where it's like, oh, like, why are you showing a trailer if there's no gameplay, like this, that, right? Like, and some people feel that way. Personally, I think marketing beats like that matter a lot. And I agree that like it hits a point where it's diminishing returns and you get that go away heat where it's like, fuck off, I don't want to hear about this game anymore. Show me the game. But in the same breath,
Yeah, and sometimes that can then fall back on you, right?
uh-huh.
What's that? Is it a Marvel game? I can't remember. It's Marvel Avengers or whatever it is that's being delayed. The Rocksteady game. Which one's that? No, it's
Oh,
a
no, no, no,
DC
no, no,
game,
no.
right?
It's that's Gotham Knights. Not
Yeah,
Gotham Knights.
Gotham
Arkham, what is it
Arkham
called?
something.
No, it's Suicide Squad. Sorry. Sorry.
Suicide Squad. Yeah,
I got like
yeah.
3
Like
layers deep there and I'm like, which one are we talking about? It's Suicide
we
Squad
saw
Kill the
that.
Justice League is the game.
Yeah, and we saw that initially. Everyone was really excited. Wow, cool. Suicide Squad game. This looks great. We've got a cinematic trailer. We're all hyped up. Then we see the gameplay and we're like, oh
Uh-oh.
dear. Oh no.
Yeah. I
So
mean,
I think
I
it
was never
can
too
go
hyped up
both
on
ways.
it if I'm honest, but yeah, and that's the thing is I'm with you, right? Like there are times where that goes against you. And I think like Starfield is like, in a weird position where it's like we've been talking about this game for so fucking long. Cyberpunk was like that, right? Where it's like it becomes like mythological. You're like, "Oh, this is going to be the best game ever. It's going to change my life." And it's like if it lives up to that, great. then you did it and awesome. But if it doesn't, then you have all that baggage just come falling down
Mhm.
on you. And that is a tough thing to come back from, you know? But I think I remember back to like the PlayStation E3 presentations of old, right? Where they were like, I think it was the 2015, 14, I want to say, where they revealed Horizon, they revealed God of War, they revealed The Last of Us Part 2. And like that was perfect, right? Because they teed all those games up. You hear about some of them the next year, you hear about some of them the year after that, and you get your little, yeah, it's still in development. Here's this new feature. Cool, cool, cool.
Yeah, but Xbox has done that exact same thing, right? You've
But
got a
then they
list
don't
here and
deliver.
you've got a list here in the dock. Perfect Dark, Fable, The Outer Worlds 2, Contraband, Gears 6, Hellblade 2, Avowed, State of Decay 3, Indiana Jones, and Everwild. There's probably even more than that. We've not heard much about any of them.
Most of
In
them we
fact, we've
haven't
heard
heard about
nothing
since they were
about any of
announced.
them since they were announced. Hellblade 2 we saw last year.
Sure.
We've not seen anything since. Actually, we saw a little bit of the at the Epic Games showcase for Unreal Engine 5. But we've not seen anything about any of these since, other than Perfect Dark seems to get passed around from studio to studio, and like there's a new person helping them every 2 minutes,
I mean,
seemingly.
I think that speaks to the question of management, right? And how is that going? And are they managing all these studios effectively? And I think the answer is no, you know? And I don't even
Hmm.
know that that's necessarily to say that like management of the games is poor, but like we heard, right, that like they kind of let Redfall market how they wanted. They weren't involved in that as much. And it's like, you guys gotta be involved in that stuff. You have to have these chips set up and
You're the
know what's
publisher.
coming. And yeah, that's your whole
You should be
fucking
doing it.
job.
That's your job.
And
I
not to just
genuinely
write
don't
blank checks
understand
and then
that.
be upset when
Yeah.
the game comes out. It's like, yeah, man, like what are you doing if not that? Somebody's got to be steering the ship and coordinating all these efforts and making sure that you're hitting that one big game a quarter and that they're all good. And like I said, I think the narrative that they've been more mixed or more bad than good is bullshit. It's not fair to the games that have come out and been great, of which there are many, but a lot of them are not headline grabbing games. They are more niche. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think that's one of the strengths of Game Pass. But in the same breath, you've been hyping me up for Starfield now for years. And like, and with Redfall, right? You had to know if that game came out, right? And Bethesda had never been acquired, it wouldn't have been as much of a story, right? It would have been, oh yeah, like the Prey team made this weird multiplayer game and it wasn't good. Yeah, Bethesda probably made them do that. It sucks. That's a shame. We love Arcane.
I don't
Hope
know
their
that
next game's
Bethesda
good.
did make them do it though. I don't
Even say that you didn't. That would have been the narrative, right? Whereas
Yeah.
now it's the first $70 Xbox AAA exclusive game is a failure. That is
Yeah.
a way different story, however you slice it. It would have been a disappointment, but it wouldn't have been a black eye in the way that this is. And, I mean, you gotta hope. You gotta hope that Starfield comes out and it meets expectations. Or, God forbid, they delay it again because
I
it's got to
don't
be
think they're
good.
gonna delay I don't think they're gonna delay it. I think we've got that direct in June. They've got the showcase, and then they're doing a whole other thing just on Starfield, so it's not sucking the air out of the
Right.
room. And I think that's the right thing to do. I think Forza Motorsport's getting delayed. It's getting pushed out of 2023 into next year, which I think probably would be the right thing to do. Um, I think just release Starfield. That's all you need to do, really. Make that right. Focus all your efforts on that. And I know they're wildly different teams.
Sure.
It's obviously two completely different studios and even two different companies. One's ZeniMax, one's Xbox. So I'll have to wait and see what happens. But yeah, I mean, I'm not confident about it anymore. I think if Redfall had come out and it was a slam dunk, I'd have been like, yeah, I've got a bit more faith that they can pull Starfield off. But after that, I don't know.
I mean, and maybe that works in their favor, Maybe this lowers everybody's expectations, and then now we're like, "Oh, it's actually good. Cool. Great. It's good. It's a 9. Great."
Yeah, but would you after the marketing for Redfall and how excited you were, have gone on to think that, yeah, this is gonna come out, it's gonna be a 56 on
Absolutely not.
Metacritic?
Absolutely not. I thought the lowest chance I thought maybe it's a 7, right? For it to cut 60, I was like, "Oof, uh-oh." But again, Starfield's a different beast than that, and it's been in development for a long time. Like,
Mhm.
I wanna believe that it's not gonna have that problem. But I'm with you in that my confidence is absolutely shaken. I'm not confident it'll come out and be good. I'm pretty confident it's gonna come out at 30 FPS, and
And I honestly think that's fine.
yeah,
If the visuals
if
are
the game
there
is
and it
good,
runs at 30 and, yeah, it's a good game, I think it's fine. There's points in Tears of the Kingdom when it dips to 20 frames per
right.
second, and it's like, I don't care, the
I'm
game's
not thinking
fun.
about it. The game is great,
No.
right? Who
Yeah.
cares? So
So I
that's
can forgive that. I genuinely can forgive that if it's a good game.
agreed. All right, so let's close things out with PlayStation, right? So, PlayStation, I think, quieter year than Nintendo, but I think by and large, it's been mostly successful, right? They had a really big L
Mm.
in PSVR 2. I think that's going to go the way of the PlayStation Vita at this point and be one of those
And
famous
even
blunders,
well,
but
an even bigger L with Forspoken, they put all their eggs in that
not
basket
great.
as their big title for the first quarter of the year, and it just, yep, huge flop.
And yeah, and not to take away from those as failures, they are definitely big failures. Um, there's also, I think we just had the studio closure of Concrete Genie as developer Pixel Opus, which is a big bummer. Great small studio that I think was supposed to be working on a VR title or something next. Is I my mem So wondering if that's indicative of them wanting to clean up and get rid of some of those other, become leaner for the going into the recession and the tighter times, having less of those kind of creative, like weird things, like they're shutting down dreams. I imagine Media Molecule's next game is going to be a more traditional game. Things like that.
It's a real shame. We briefly spoke about that last week, but it feels like Dreams could have been ripe for the picking for a PC port, and I think over there it could have made a real audience in that
Yeah.
you've got a mouse and keyboard to craft these experiences. You put them up, and then anyone can play them on the PlayStation, on the PS5, on PC. It could have been their Roblox, and I don't think they gave it the the kind of time of day that it needed. It
Yeah. And
required really the Move controllers with the camera setup in order to do any kind of crafting. Was not really,
they have a real
well
problem with that
marketed.
too, of investing in something that's like weird and non-traditional and then like not buying in on it after the fact, which is a shame. I think that they were hoping that this would be more of a Little Big Planet, but like it was inherently a more weird, tough to market experience. And the fact that like they never made it free, they never brought it to, like the PlayStation collection. Like there was never that effort to be like, no, 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 like you got to get in on this. This is a cool thing that's happening here on PlayStation, and you
It
want to
should
be
have
a
been
part of it.
free with microtransactions, like, "Oh, you
Uh-huh.
wanna buy these
Or
kind of art
I
packs for
think
your game,"
it
or
should have been
people can
free
sell
to
their games.
it should have been, yeah, like you could that was the thing they talked about too, is like, can we make it where you could use this to publish games? And like they never got around to that. But I think it would have been interesting if they were like, hey, it's free to play. You can play Dreams for free, but if you want to make Dreams, you got to buy in, right? Or like you get there's a highlighted one every month, or some things like you can play a certain number of them and get in it, and figure out why this is a place you'd want to hang out and check out new
Yeah, I
games.
mean, I think you literally just ape what Roblox has done, and has become one of the most valuable companies on the planet somehow. Which is you make everything free. It's a free platform. The games are you can download the game for free. You can download Roblox for free, but when you're in there, you have to buy the Robux, and you can buy the individual little experiences that people have made, and they make some money, and you make money on every single transaction that's come through because you're the
Yeah.
one that's selling the Robux in the first place, and you've got your own like little mini economy going on within Dreams, and it could have been a really good experience. I was quite saddened to see that shut down.
It's a shame that it never felt like it lived up to its potential,
Yeah.
for such an exciting idea. But I think even when you line up all of those failures, of which there's several, right? But like with Forspoken, that feels like more of a failure
It's
for
not really them.
Square,
Yeah.
right? Like it's like, yeah, okay, like this didn't pan out, but like whatever, right? Like I don't know how much that affected PlayStation,
But it's
right?
not but the thing is, it's not the first PlayStation big exclusive that this has happened to. We had the same thing last year with Babylon's Fall, and it's just
Yeah.
crazy that we've had it 2 years in the running. PlayStation must have seen these games when they were like, "Yeah, we're gonna give you a bunch of cash to make it exclusive,"
That's
and
the
I
thing
don't know
though.
why those decisions got made.
But again, I think you take it back to the Redfall thing. I don't like did, previews of those games look different than what they were the final version was.
Yeah, they probably got shown a vertical slice of it, and,
The
it's like, "Oh,
idea
it's gonna
of
look way better in
Forspoken,
2 years."
right,
Yeah.
was appealing. Like the first look we got of it, I thought it looked cool. It wasn't until it was actually imminent where it was like, "Oh, uh-oh. This doesn't look
Don't you
great."
think it would be great if Link's arm spoke to him as well? Like, I feel like, he's got a magic arm as well in Tears of the Kingdom, why
It
not?
could work, you know? But yeah, so and PSVR I think is the same thing. Where like that is a super visible failure from them, but it's also like the people that bought it are really passionate about it, and like there's been discussion about like if you say a bad thing about PSVR 2 online, the PSVR 2 people come for you and talk about how fucking awesome it is. So like again, like I wouldn't look
It's
at it
like the
as
cyberpunk people sliding
yeah.
into our
So it's like I
DMs.
wouldn't look at it as a success, but I also think it's the kind of failure that if you're the average PS5 owner, it's pretty easy to ignore, right? If you didn't buy it, who gives a shit if there's no games on it, you know?
I give a shit that that's their focus for the year. And I think that's the issue I have with it,
Yeah.
right? Is they've chosen to launch this really niche, super hyper expensive product that not many people are buying into, that had one real big title on it and the rest of it was a lackluster launch lineup. We're still waiting on some of the other promised titles like the Resident Evil VR versions. And I think that for me is why we've got realistically one big title from them this year in Spider-Man 2, and then a big DLC for Horizon with the
Right.
Burning Shores DLC. But other than those two, there's not really much coming out of the first party studios. And I think that's fine. I think in a good year, well, I think for them, if Tears of the Kingdom wasn't here and Starfield wasn't here, Spider-Man 2 probably may have clinched the
I
game of the
mean,
year.
right? And we just talked about Starfield. If Starfield doesn't live up to expectations, Spider-Man 2 might still be the second best game this year. That's
Yeah.
totally in the cards, right? Like Insomniac, great studio, right? The first game, beloved. It's
But
not crazy to
we've
think they'll deliver a fire game.
I think for me though, the biggest L this year was The Last of Us Part 2 on PC. And it was
Yeah.
a huge PC port for them on the
Part
back of The
1.
Last of Us. Yeah, part 1.
You
On the
said
back
part
of
2. I'm
yeah,
just
yeah.
correcting you for the
On
comments.
on on the back of the HBO series, and it feels like it was rushed to
was
capitalize on that, right?
And it was, like, so close, like, right? Like, it's like if it had come out and just been okay, it would've been like, what a win. What a win for them. It would've sold
Mhm.
insane. It still sold well, but, like, it was this big now they're still fixing it, and, like, it'll get there. It'll be fine. Eventually, it'll just be a thing we were, "Oh, remember it launched bad?" Yeah, but it sucks. It was an unforced error for sure. And again, like, right, you talk about The Last of Us on HBO, that was a huge win for them, right? Like, that is you know, they achieved something that no one else has been able to do in terms of video game adaptations where like even the ones that have been good, right? Like and again, good by whose metric, whatever. Mario, right? Hit with fans, not a hit critically, right? Good at the box office. Sonic the Hedgehog, similar kind of deal, right? This is prestige television. This is an HBO series, and it lived
Yeah.
up to that mark of quality, and it appealed to a much broader audience. And you look on the like what's coming up on the horizon for PlayStation. I mean, they're doubling down on multimedia, right? We got a trailer for that Gran Turismo movie that's got David Harbour from Stranger Things and Orlando Bloom.
Oh, that really needed Vin Diesel
Can you
in it.
imagine?
Come on.
But and I'll say, right, like we joke, right? I remember when that got announced. It's like, what the fuck is this movie possibly going to be about? It's whatever. But it's like it's Neil Blomkamp. He's a great director. He's made some great movies. Like the idea that this movie is actually going to be pretty good. I saw the trailer and I was like, might be all right. This might be a solid action movie, and like a solid car
Mm.
flick. And like that's the bar they need to clear. They don't need to be. Not everything needs to be, as critically, emotionally, devastating as The Last of Us. They just got to make good blockbuster movies. And then, like there's that Twisted Metal show that we got a trailer or the poster for and everything, right? Like we've got Days Gone, Ghost, Gravity Rush, Jack and Daxter, Twisted Metal, or I said Twisted Metal, God of War Horizon. Like they're all in development. We'll
Well, I
see how
mean, to
many of
bring it
them.
ba to bring it back to Xbox, I mean, they've got a bunch going on. They've got the Gears of War stuff with, Netflix, and they've got the Fallout stuff with Amazon, so those
Yeah.
might be
But,
good. Probably not gonna
but
be The Last of Us, though, is
what's
it?
the show they put out? It was Halo.
Yeah, yeah, or
Not
Paramount.
great. Not great. Right. So, you know, um, I think it's funny because I think PlayStation feels like this is like such a safe year for them, right? Because it's like, all right, we're gonna push out all this stuff that sucks and it's gonna fail, but we're gonna have enough of the stuff you care about that you've been waiting for. That I feel like by the end of the year, we're not gonna think about like. I think when we look back on this year as individuals, I'm gonna be thinking about how much I like Spider-Man 2, not how much PSVR 2 wasn't a hit. You know, it
Yeah,
was what
I'm
it
gonna
was.
be thinking, about nothing to do with PlayStation and about Tears of the Kingdom.
Exactly.
I haven't turned my PS5 on this year, and we're in almost June.
I'm trying to think of the last thing I played on it.
It would have been the Burning Shores DLC,
Oh
right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. I played that right before I left.
But yeah, I literally haven't turned it on other than that. There's been no reason for me to play on the PS5. On Xbox, I've always got a reason. I'm a Game Pass subscriber. I can play Persona over there. There's
Yep.
always something for me to pick up. PlayStation side of things, I don't subscribe to PS Plus, and granted, if I did subscribe to PS Plus, maybe there would be something there for me to play. But there's been very little output really, and I think that
Yeah.
is a problem that they do need to address because even the third party stuff early in the year there's been
I
nothing
think
really.
that's the thing though, is like I don't think they need to. And again, I know I get so much like I'm a Sony pony or whatever, right? And I'm like looking over these things, but it's because one of the other bullets we have on our pros list is that they have had record breaking PS5 sales all year. And
Mhm.
I think it's the exact same conversation we had in the PS4 generation. And I mentioned this earlier, where it was like, where's the big game? Where's the exclusive? Where's the this? Where's the that? They don't need it. The PlayStation 5 brand is so strong that most people, for their AAA exclusive, whatever device, they have a PlayStation. They don't have an Xbox. So that's the only place they're playing third party games anyway. So, like, yeah, maybe Forspoken wasn't a big hit this year, and maybe they didn't, whatever. Jedi Survivor just came out. And you got to imagine the vast majority of people that played it on console are playing it on PlayStation, right? And it doesn't matter that it's an exclusive because if I'm only playing on PlayStation, or my primary device or one of the two devices I have is my PlayStation, that's where you're playing those games. And maybe you have a PC, maybe you have a Switch, you're playing other stuff there, whatever. But like for a lot of people, they only have one console or they have an Xbox or a PlayStation and then they have a Switch, right? Like that's a very common person. And I don't think that that takes away from any of the shitty like L's that PlayStation has taken this year. But the narrative around PlayStation this year is not what's going on at PlayStation. It's not, oh my God, I can't believe PlayStation is so fucking up. We're not having to have PlayStation CEO go on podcasts and apologize for the state of their releases, right?
Yes, because I can definitely see Jim Ryan having,
Not that he would.
that level of decorum, yeah.
Not that he would. But you get what I'm saying, right? Like we talked a lot of shit about PSVR 2 when it dropped, but like that's done. It's done. It failed. Okay, whatever. We'll move on. It'll be a thing that they marginalize in their presentations for a couple of years until they quietly pretend it doesn't exist anymore. I've seen this happen
Mhm.
before. I've seen PlayStation do this. But the PS5, it's fine. And is this going to be a quiet year like the Switch had a quiet year last year or the year before, depending on who you ask? Maybe so. But Spider-Man 2 will probably be one of the top 5 games when we look back on the
Yeah, yeah,
PlayStation.
I think so. I think
So
I
it's
think
like,
you're right.
how much does that matter? If you have one game and it fucking kicks ass. That's kind of
Well,
enough.
especially if, if Starfield doesn't land and Spider-Man's releasing around the same time, then the conversation is, "Oh, Xbox put out another fail, while there's an absolute slam dunk over on the Sony side of the
Yeah.
fence." So, yeah, I could easily see that. I think for me, though, there's just there's just not enough to draw existing PS5 owners in. Yes, if there's enough there for you to want to pick up a PS5, and obviously, as you said, the record-breaking PS5 sales reflect that. But I think if you already own a PS5, there's been nothing so far if you didn't want to pick up PSVR 2.
And I'll say this though, we forgot to mention this because it's not a first party game, but Final Fantasy 16 is also coming out this year as an exclusive on PlayStation. And if that
And that
lives
is a
up
big one.
to
Yeah.
expectations, that's a huge game. Right.
Yeah.
So then that becomes two big wins this year instead of one. And
Yeah, you're
again,
right.
when you're comparing to Xbox as the other one that you're because they're not beating Nintendo, right? Like I think it's clear Nintendo's taking the year for my money.
Yeah, mine too.
Okay, coming in second with record sales, that's pretty good. That's not bad. They're not going to be upset about that.
Yeah, unless it turns out that Starfield is that generation-defining game, and
Correct.
then they come in 3rd, and then it's like, "Oh, we had, like, all these losses," like, "Oh, a
Hmm.
disastrous PC launch from one of their prestige," it's like, arguably their most prestigious game at this point this
Uh
year
huh.
because of the Last of Us HBO series, and they just did, and it was handled by the studio that developed the game. Naughty Dog was involved directly, and it just was released in that state.
No
It's
excuse. Yeah.
mind-blowing to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not even like they just were like, "Oh, yeah, we're outsourcing this to some other studio, and they made a mess of it, and we're really sorry that it got released in that state." It was literally handled by themselves.
And then I think the other question though, right? That I think could like maybe tip the scale in PlayStation's favor over Xbox, even though I think they're kind of predispositioned to look like they came in second either way, right? Just because all they have to do is not fuck up things that seem like they shouldn't get fucked up, right? Which
Mhm.
we've seen that bag get fumbled before, but not usually from PlayStation. I think usually the bare minimum you expect from a PlayStation first party is that it's an 8, right? Which has been pretty consistent. But we know that there's supposed to be that big PlayStation showcase, and this would be the first one we've had in years. I think since launch year. Because they've been pretty quiet.
Possibly. I think I don't know that it was launched yet because we spoke about one on FlipScreen. Um, but you
I guess it
could
would have
be
been
right.
maybe the year following then. That because
Yeah.
because again, I know we've had state of plays and stuff, but like the PlayStation Presents, the big meaty showcase, it's been a while since we've had one, if
Yeah,
memory serves.
2021, and that was the one where they announced Spider-Man 2, God of War Ragnarok, Wolverine,
There you go.
The KOTOR remake, which is not coming,
R.I.P.
Forspoken, and the remaster of Alan Wake.
Right.
So there
So
was quite a lot announced there.
imagine this showcase that rumored showcase this year comes and hits at a similar capacity, right? And we get updates on stuff like Ghost of Tsushima 2 or like Sony London is working on that fantasy game, get an update on Wolverine, right? As Spider-Man is more imminent. Like they have a lot of
Yeah, I
things
mean,
in
we
development we
spoke
haven't
a
heard about. The
we
Last of
spoke a
Us
little bit about it.
multiplayer game, right? Like
Mm. I think that's gonna be at, Summer Game Fest. I think they keep that for Jeff again like they did last year. But we spoke a bit about it last week, so I won't reiterate too much. But I think for me, the biggest thing that I want from them is another Astrobot game, and I could easily see that having a VR mode and also being
yeah,
like a full-blown
for
game.
sure.
Like, it could easily tie in, and I think we're ready for that.
There's also
Or
that handheld that
since
was rumored earlier this year that was supposed to get released this year. So it's
I
like,
don't know about that though, because like, are they really going to put out so much hardware? Because there's also the rumor that they're doing the revised PS5 with the
right.
attachable disk drive,
This
and
is
it's going to be a
supposed to,
little
I
bit
think, be
smaller.
as like a companion with that. Who knows though, right? Maybe that's a next year thing. Maybe they announce it this year. Either way, they have some bullets left in the chamber, right? That they could pull out and that would make headlines and would get attention. And I think add to the credence of like this was a solid year for them, if not a good year. right?
Yeah.
I don't think you're gonna look at this and be like, "Oh, what a big fail of a year for PS5." Whereas, like we said, Xbox feels like it's very much at risk of that, and I don't think I think unless the stuff that's ahead for PlayStation doesn't live up to expectations, I think it'll be a safe enough year for them that they can squeak by as being like, yeah, we came in second place, we did fine.
Hmm.
And then who's to say, right? Like we know that there's going to be those things lined up, and that there are going to be more of those games on the horizon. So, maybe it's not next year. Maybe it is, the year after that where we start having those bigger games start hitting for them.
God, I really hope it's next year. I feel like this generation's just like dragging. I really just want something juicy from both Xbox and from PlayStation at this point.
I mean, and that's the thing. If the games we've talked about hit, this will be the first year where that's been the case since the new,
Yeah,
right? Where every one of them has a legit game of the year competitor that had its moment in the sun, right? Because they're coming out in kind of different ish. Well, I guess Spider Man and Starfield are a little on top of each other, but yeah,
yeah.
but
I think there's a lot of games in contention for Game of the Year though, because I do think Baldur's Gate 3 is probably going to be up there. I think Diablo 4 is probably going to be up there. It's going to be a tough year.
yeah.
Hades 2 is coming out this year. That's probably going to be in the running. There's a lot to be considered. And might be just like packed full of sequels up there as well in for Game of the Year apart from Starfield, which would be
Which
interesting.
is like kind of right? Like it's like a sequel in the way that Elden Ring was, where it's like it's not a sequel, but it has juice, right, from the
Yeah,
previous. The studio has that excitement around it, that juice around it. So
yeah.
let's put a pin on this, right? We'll put a period on the end of this sentence here. Who do we think comes out on top? I want your list, right? For me, I'm thinking as of right now, my prediction is Nintendo comes out on top, PlayStation comes out in the middle, Xbox comes out on bottom.
I think Nintendo, Xbox, PlayStation. I think the narrative's
I
probably gonna
really hope you're
shift.
right. I
Yeah,
really
I really want Phil to turn it around. I think the narrative for Xbox is gonna shift when we see Starfield. I think people are gonna be excited about it, and I think we're gonna see a lot at that Xbox showcase to make people excited, and hopefully some, like, shadow drops.
I think that's going to be the question. Is on the other side of Summer Game Fest, maybe we check in on this topic.
Yeah, we'll have to do a check-in and see
Hype
what we
check.
think. I'd be interested, yeah.
How
But
does the
yeah,
rest of the year play out?
I think no way anyone takes down Nintendo this year so far. Like Tears of the Kingdom's a slam dunk. Everyone loves that game.
So this is a question here that I think is a fun one. That Max threw in the document before he had to unfortunately miss today because he was feeling a little ill. What is one move that each company could pull that would guarantee them a win? And Max gave two examples here. He said Sony announcing Bloodborne 2, or Metroid, or Nintendo releasing Metroid Prime 4 could be examples of that.
I think there's nothing else Nintendo needs to do. They've done what they need to do.
Yeah,
But I
they
think
got
if
it right.
I think Mario Odyssey 2 would probably seal the deal and we'll have like another 2017 going on. Um, I think I think PlayStation Spider-Man 2 is probably good enough. I think um maybe they do a price cut on the PlayStation. I think that could probably be a really big win for them when they release the version without the disc drive. I
I
actually think it's
doubt it
probably
though,
gonna
right?
be the
Like this
opposite, and it's
this
gonna be like a silent price increase in that
yeah.
the when you add the disc drive on, it becomes out more expensive than what we're paying for currently for the disc
The
drive
sales
version.
being what they are, I don't see them cutting the price.
And Xbox, I mean, I don't know, release some fucking games for once. Like that would be nice. Like if they actually put some games out that were good, I think people would be happy. But I also think you could announce stuff like Fallout New Vegas 2 and Obsidian's making it,
Yeah.
and you could do some like real fan favorites like that. And I think people would be really hyped up and excited. That's all they really need to do is something like that.
Yeah, I think for me, like Nintendo doesn't need to do anything else. It's theirs to give away at this point, right? Like they are already winning. I think the only thing they need to do to secure the win is the other two need to not show up bigger, and that's out of their control. PlayStation, I don't think PlayStation can win this year. I don't think there's any slice. Like, unless Spider-Man 2 is like a 10 out of 10 and it's so definitively exceptional, which I just don't, I don't
I
know that
could see
that's.
Ragnarok DLC coming and it being really good, but I
Yeah,
don't
but
think that's
come on,
coming
is
this
that enough to
year.
win out against Tears of the Kingdom? Absolutely not,
No.
right? And I think with Xbox, it's Starfield. It's if Starfield comes out and it is the second coming of Christ in the way that people need it to be, then that could dethrone Tears of the Kingdom because I could see the conversation then becoming Tears of the Kingdom is great, but it's more Breath of the Wild. It's a sequel to Breath of the Wild, right? It innovated, it added, but it doesn't have the same impact, whatever, whatever. Starfield is something truly new. It's a new IP. It's a new step for Western RPGs. It's this, it's that, it's this, it's that. If that happens, then maybe Xbox is able to take the crown, which would be incredible. I hope that happens. I really do. I would love to have the opinion at the end of the year that Starfield is a better game than Tears of the Kingdom. That would be incredible. That would make it one of the best games ever made, right? So fingers
Yeah, I
crossed.
mean, yeah, it would be the best game ever made, It's Tears of the Kingdom's up there as number 1 on OpenCritic at the moment. It's, I think,
Yeah.
tied on Metacritic, although it might be 1 point below because of that, Gfinity review pulling it down a notch, which was kinda crazy that one
In
review could pull it down.
insane. And then I think other end of this question is what's one thing that each company could do to put them at the bottom of the pile? I think Nintendo's already passed it, right? They can't be. I think Xbox, it's Starfield coming out and being bad, right? I think they could even survive a delay better than they could survive a bad launch. And I think
Yeah, I
PlayStation,
think so, but I do think that they will lose anyway if they delay. If they have no other
yeah.
games for the rest of the year, I do
No,
think
you're
that's
right.
still a loss.
You're right. Yeah.
Um, and I
And
think PlayStation is probably gonna be a delay and another price increase on the PlayStation. It will make
yeah.
them look greedy.
Yeah. And again, right, if Spider-Man's delayed or Final Fantasy's delayed, that would be enough, right? Because that's all they've got. But we shall see. And then I guess the
Or
final
another bad
question,
PC launch. I could see some more bad PC launches just being like,
I don't think those
"What are
matter
you
that
playing
much.
at?"
Like they're embarrassing, but I don't think they're the same. Like I talked about this, right? Like I think PC gamers are unfortunately used to bad PC ports.
Yeah, I know.
That doesn't justify it, but I just don't think it's the same as like launching a bad game, right? It's not the same L because you have confidence it'll get better, right? All they have to do is fix it, and then it's like, okay, whatever. It sucked for a few months. Who cares?
Yeah, sometimes you have it the other way around, where the PC version is developed first in the case of Cyberpunk, and it's clearly the kind of flagship version, and then the
Yeah,
console port sucks. It's the other way around.
sure. And then I guess the last question here is: does it really matter who wins?
No, no, it doesn't. It's
I
capitalism. Every company is bad at the end of the day. So
I think it only really matters for Xbox. I think this is of the three, they're the only company where their success this year matters a lot. I think like PlayStation is already in a good place, so even if they had a definitively bad year, right? If they put nothing out except VR2 and it was a failure and Forspoken sucked, um, that would suck for them. That would be embarrassing for them. But they're already the front runner, right? Like against Xbox, so it's like you can take a bad year when you're in first when you're in third and then you have a bad year, that sucks. And I think Nintendo's in the same boat, right? Where it's like Nintendo's success has been so steady the last couple of years that it's kind of like the fact that this is like a all out banger year is like great, but I mean, they're already dominating. How much does it matter, right? Like it's great. It's another feather in their cap, but it's
yeah, I mean
not.
they're on track to become the number 2 best-selling console of all time, and they already have the number 2 best-selling console of all time, and it was the DS. So it's only going to be the PS2 ahead of them, and I think they
Yeah.
could probably, if they continue the Switch brand, and like the next one's like Switch Pro rather than Switch 2,
Yeah,
they'll
Game Boy
become
Color situation.
yeah, they will become the best-selling console of all time, which will be absolutely massive for them.
Mhm. So yeah, it's funny cuz as interesting a year this is, I think the pressure is really only on for Xbox because they've just had a couple, very public blunders. And I think the vibe in the Xbox camp is not good right now. There's
Mhm.
an air of disappointment and dissatisfaction in a way that I don't think is true on the PlayStation side of things. and is obviously definitely not true on the Nintendo side of things, at least right now, because everybody who's a Nintendo fan is like, hey, we have the best game of the year on our
Hey,
device.
if you're into Zelda anyway, if you're not into Zelda, then, well, I guess you probably like some of the other games that they've released this year because they've released like 12, as we said at the top.
Yeah, good amount of
Yeah.
variety among them too.
Interesting year. Interesting year indeed.
It's been a good one. Yeah, it's been a
So
surprisingly
far,
good one.
yeah. Not even 6 months in. Yeah.
Yeah. The back half of it's going to be nuts, though. Surviving
Yeah.
this fall is going to be insane. There's so many
I
games
know.
coming out on top of each
Yeah,
other.
we're just gonna have to all play something different so we can talk about it.
Yeah. It's already starting up though, right? Like you said, Diablo 2 is 2 weeks out, right? Like it's
Yeah.
like
Can't wait
with
for that.
we're getting on that treadmill soon. Where it's like, yeah, there's a big game every couple weeks, right? It was
Yeah, and then it's like,
Jedi,
do I play
that's
Baldur's Gate
Tears, it's Diablo.
3 or Starfield or Spider-Man 2 or what am I it's like gonna be crazy.
Yeah, it's gonna be a nuts one. But we'll have to wait until a future episode of Flip Screen Games podcast to talk about all those games. So remember, if you want to write in with your thoughts on who's been winning 2023 so far, or who you think is going to take the crown by the end of the year, hey, guess what? There's a bunch of ways you can do that. Head over to flipscreen.games. You can join our Discord. You can write into us questions at flipscreen.games. You can become a Patreon supporter and get this episode early. All kinds of good stuff. However you choose to go and show your support, we thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Flip Screen Games podcast. For the crew, I've been Pete. He's been Steve. We'll see you next week.